We have a problem with violence in the Northern Territory. We're all aware of that. We're astounded to hear that there are 7,500 criminal assaults that happen in the Northern Territory every year. We believe that sport has a role to play in confronting this problem and doing something about it, and this is an opportunity today for the CEOs of the 4 major sporting codes, if I can say that, to come together here and have a discussion around that very issue. They talked about a whole range of things here, and we think that this is a moment where we're going to change a few things. We expect that in years from now people will look back, history will look back and say they did something on that day. They sat down, they discussed it, and they've come up with a better idea. It can't just go on the way that it is. We see terrible acts of violence being committed everywhere. We're living with it when we certainly don't have to live with it. And these are, violence finishes up with deaths and injuries and people getting terribly hurt and people losing self-confidence and all those sorts of things as a result of violence. We say no more to violence, we want it to stop.
Certainly AFL, we've got over 40,000 participants across the territory, and as we've got a massive opportunity to impact behaviour, and certainly violence is not acceptable in any way, shape or form. And we'll be working with this group and other members of the community, the police and others, to try and influence and reduce the amount of violence in our community. And we're committed to that through our clubs, and to education as well, making sure we put programs in place to educate and inform people about the impact of violence, and also growing more leaders, making people turn up and take responsibility for their actions. From AFL&T point of view, we're committed to this cause and look forward to working with these stakeholders here.
I think the main thing we take out of today is that as a sport we need to be unified. We need to make a very clear statement to all our stakeholders, all the people who play, coach, committee and our spectators, that enough is enough. And we join with Charlie in the No More campaign, but we're going to make some very practical steps in the next few months which we'll announce to you guys, and which will make some changes within each of our sports. And we don't just start with the 4 sports today, we want to include all sports because most Territorians play sport at some side in their life, so it's very important that we get in there and start early with the young men and boys who play our sport.
We're aware that we form essential parts of the community that we're involved in, and certainly we want to play our part in eradicating this bad behaviour, and we want to play our part to continue to try and stamp out and have zero tolerance of violent behaviour.
We stand united with the other major football codes in our lack of tolerance for any violent behaviour, and that obviously goes for the sporting field and in the community as a whole. I think everyone is aligned in the community that the sorts of behaviours that we're seeing recently on both sporting fields and in schools more recently is totally unacceptable, and we want to do our bit to ensure that we take a leadership role in explaining to our young people in particular that this sort of behaviour is just not right. We obviously deal with things on the field, on tours, in the crowd as and when they occur, and certainly we don't want to walk past any behaviours that we don't think are acceptable.
First of all, I'd just like to thank Charlie King for coming up with this initiative, and as we know, Charlie is relentless in his pursuit of no more violence, not just in our sporting codes but within our communities. And I also want to thank the 4 codes for coming together. One of our mission, our new mission, is around, as a Northern Territory Police Force, is that we're building a safer Northern Territory through prevention, integrity and unity. And today we're united as a group, standing shoulder to shoulder and saying that we want no more violence in our community. It's not acceptable, all of these behaviours and incidents and so on. And we do need the support of the community, and we thank the community for their support, their continued support. But as a society, we also need to lift our standards. It's not acceptable to have coward punches, to assault people, to abuse them, threaten, harass, intimidate and so on. So we as a police force are here to support the 4 codes and Charlie in our role and how we can actually play a greater role in prevention and preventing these things from happening in our society.
One of the issues we talked about today was code hopping as well, so persons who commit offences with one code have shown that they might hop across to another code. So we're going to ensure that that doesn't happen. The codes are now speaking to each other about those sorts of incidences. We also talked about having discussions around anger management. If you want to join a code and you come along and you want to play that sport, then you do need to sit down and go through a course of anger management so you understand what anger is. So I was really pleased to hear that today. I've also got to tell you that I felt so good when I rang these 5 gentlemen behind me and I said, I want to have a discussion, let's have a discussion around violence in the Territory, that we can do something better about it. We want sport to do more than just be somewhere where you go to win or not win. We want sport to be more concerned about the violence that's happening in our community, and as the Commissioner has said, we want a Territory where it is a safe place to live and people feel safer here, and you can go along to sporting events and be part of it without having to deal with some of these issues. And also, the other point I want to make is where violence happens where it's not in sport and it's happening somewhere else outside of sport, that information will then get to sport and sport will do something about it. So I'm really pleased that that strong comment is coming from this group here, so I'm really proud of them today. You may be aware that 8 million Australians are involved in sport on any weekend. 8 million of us are involved in sport. We think sport has a responsibility to take on these issues and do something about it. Imagine if 8 million people said no more to violence and told someone, and then there was 16 million. We think sport is a really powerful place to go, and we know sport would not walk away from that, so we're really pleased.